So my name is Javier. I'm a student from Masters in Cinema Animation. I come from Spain. I'm an Erasmus student here. And I will just present a bit the color class and the project I'm working with this class. So the contents will be a small introduction to how we proceed and what is based on the project, and then a conclusion of both things. So the color semantics class is, well, as you know, is held by, and is primarily based on research, on author studies and other theories. And I would say it's a mix between theory and practice. We have classes where we are, of course, explaining the basis of the theories, but it's also really founded on the exercises and playing with colors and analyzing media or designs or anything. And what we have seen already that we are basically on the semantic color space that aligns different colors in different axes that have some keywords attached to them. Like for example, cold and warm, outer and inner, heavy, lightweight. We use these kind of keywords as axes in which colors can be placed into, and that can be used to analyze and to use their meaning or their intention for analyzing and for creating as well. But we also see the colors in many contexts, like in cultural, in feelings, in gender, in hierarchy, like apply to many factors that we can see the colors in. And the same is with shape. We analyze the different parameters that shape can have, like rectangular, irregular, regular, and how that affects the meaning that it has in whatever we create, whatever we use to represent. And for example, one thing we usually do in class is take, like, for example, a poster or advertisements or any kind of media and see what kind of colors they have, what kind of shape is related to the color and also to the final result, and the keywords or the aspects of it that are tied to the color and to the subject of the thing that's being exposed or used. And this is a link to the database, the online database where you can see all the information and where I took the info for this presentation. And also the project, apart from the main classes, we are meant to make a project of our own, of any subject we like, and that has to be tied with the theory and the subject that we see in class. So, for my personal case, since I'm in animation, I decided to do an analysis of the animation project that I'm doing for this year, which is a small animated film. And my goal will be to analyze the color and the design and how I apply it to represent what I want to represent in this story. And I'll go through the different phases of the animation project, like the story, the designs, the drawing, and to see the themes, intentions, the feelings, a bit of everything, and to tie it with the content of the class, so the different colors and the different shapes that I use. So, for example, what I'm working on is begin with the story. So I ask myself what feelings or what ideas that the narrative of the story wants to communicate, and what colors can I use to express that, but also what colors I need to express that, because the story has their own meaning and their own boundaries. So my story really closely is based on a child that suddenly finds himself wandering through a strange dreamlike world, and that has an unexpected encounter that gives him a mysterious power. So that's the core of the story, the main subject that I'm treating. So I think what are the main ideas that are represented in this story? And I would say it's, for example, mystery, dream, myth, fantasy are kind of keywords for this story. And I think of what colors I use to express that. So going again into the database, I get that those are the concepts and the different colors that I can represent it with. So for example, we have black and blue for mystery, we have black and purple for dream, we have all these also another keywords like subconscious, like magic, like moonlight, all these different concepts that are tagged to their respective colors, respective shapes. And if we compare it, for example, to the mood board that I made for the project, we can see that there's actually many similarities in the colors that I use, like mainly the blue and the dark colors, and also some touches of green, some touches of purple. So we can see a kind of correlation between the visual aspect and the concepts that I want to represent in this film. So what colors does the story need to be represented? For example, here I have an empty frame of the film, and I know that it has to be a night setting because it's set at night. It has their stone surface because it's a stone landscape, and it has to add a magic element because it's portrayed there. It's some light color of the magic element. So we could have some colors there, okay? But if we want to apply the different concepts and different rules, we can, for example, use the purple colors in the keywords of fantasy, dream, magic to create a more purple, a more warm environment that maybe has a different meaning than the previous one. And if we, for example, want to change some of the words and put some spatial, some mystery, the colors change as well, while keeping a bit of the mood. And if we were to change green for the moon, for example, which applies to green over blue, we have a whole different ambience. And the same is if we want to apply maybe a new concept like holy that has a bit of yellow, so adds a bit of yellow to the trees. So what we can see is that portraying the same thing, the same setting, depending on what different tints of color we use and what different concepts we apply, we get different sensations and different ideas that we can represent. So, to conclude, in the color class we analyze color and shape through both a bit of theory and both a bit of practice, and that we develop our own project based on our interests, but based on the class. And that my project in particular is based on analyzing color and design through animating the story. And well, that would be everything. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you like it.